Welcome to A Parent's Guide to Child Development. I'm your host, Anna-Marie Von Furley from Fledglings Flight. Each podcast, we strive to give parents the tools they need to help their child thrive through conversations with experts in child development and psychology, where you can learn about the most important information that you didn't know existed. Today, we're talking about the importance of childbirth education and how preparing for labor, birth, and the postpartum period can shape not just your birth experience, but your confidence as a new parent from day one. I'm joined by Susan Barrett Finnazo, founder of My Baby Lady, to talk about how education helps families make informed choices and feel more supported throughout the entire birth journey. Welcome, Susan. I'm so excited to talk to you about this important topic.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yay! And you're, I think, my most fashionable guest to date with
Oh,
your snazzy glasses and your hairband that matches my my hair.
yes, it does. Look at that. My husband actually helped me dress this morning. I asked his opinion.
Oh, very good. You can give him high marks from a former fashion designer.
Very good.
For parents who may be new to this, when we say childbirth education, what does that actually include, and what do you think is most people misunderstand about it?
Excellent question. I think most people, when they hear birth education, they think learning how to breathe and what to pack in their hospital bag. And while those are definitely things that we talk about, it goes much deeper than that. The idea behind childbirth education is to lower stress levels so that birthing parents can be confident going into their labor and their birth experience. We want them to be calm under pressure and to be able to make thoughtful decisions. So we talk about what's actually happening in the body during labor so that they understand what each feeling and what each contraction or what's happening at each junction. They learn how to cope with contractions we micromanage labor. It gives them the opportunity to learn how to communicate with providers, what to expect after birth. And one of the things I always like to say is birth is really the parent's first classroom because we learn during birth how we're going to cope, how we cope with birth really helps us indicate how we're going to cope with parenthood when we actually have our children there with us.
Yeah, it's true. Nobody goes to college to have a baby. Like everyone
That's
just
right.
everyone just has it and then just makes it up as they go along. So, but that's why we're here. We're here to give
Absolutely.
people information that they need.
Yeah.
So, when should families realistically start thinking about childbirth education?
So I don't think it's ever too early to start thinking about childbirth education. Um, but ideally, you really want to, if you're going to start taking classes and look at putting your team together, you want to start probably like about 22, 24 weeks. You want to give yourself plenty of time to put a good team together. And if you're planning on hiring a doula or training somebody on your team to be your doula, you want to have enough time to take a comprehensive class. And I also encourage people to take any classes that are offered through the hospital or if your insurance is covering any education. There's no such thing as too much education. Even when they overlap, I have never once had a client come to me and say, "Oh, I learned too much, Susan."
Yeah, and it's important to start early because sometimes those babies come early like mine did. So, as
And exactly.
I mentioned in our conversation when we met is that, I was in the middle, not middle, I was in the middle of the process of taking childbirth education classes when my water broke, and I had to send my husband down to the classroom in the hospital to let them know that I wasn't going to make it to class today because I was giving birth.
Right. Yeah. So it's definitely not never too early. Um, I actually had one mom. She's one of my favorite stories. I use her story in a lot of my examples when I talk about the start of my baby lady. But when she first came to me in the very beginning, so it was her second baby when I met her. She had a 9-year-old daughter, and she was having her second baby, and she had wanted to have a vaginal birth. The first one was a C-section. And she came in the very beginning of her pregnancy and did the whole class. And she came again at the end when she was about 35 weeks. She asked if she could come again because she wanted a refresher. And she did the class a second time. And she was amazing. I had such a wonderful experience with her. She was one of those situations where she ultimately did have a second C-section, but she felt so empowered in her birth, and she was so grateful for the support. And her experience really helped define my position as a support person who really wanted to make this not just be my living but be my movement, and see that not just this person got the support that she needed, but every woman who was giving birth had the opportunity to get that support.
That's amazing. So the takeaway there is you don't have to just take the class once. You can do it more than once to prepare
You
yourself.
can.
And one of the things, one of the side effects of being pregnant and postpartum is short-term memory loss. So so you might not remember everything that was taught the first time. So a second go around would not be the worst thing either, with all the hormones that are being released as you gestate your child. What are some of the biggest gaps in knowledge you tend to see when families don't take a childbirth education class?
Another great question. I think one of the biggest things is that parents really don't, they're surprised at how long labor actually is. I'm looking at my glasses. Um, People think that, even if they know enough to follow the rule to go to the hospital when they've reached that 511 or that 411 rule, they think that once they get to the hospital it's only going to be a short period of time before that baby comes, when in reality you still could be looking at 10 to 12 hours of labor even after you've arrived at the hospital. So that one can be a shock if you haven't been prepared for that. Um, Another one is not being familiar with what the different interventions are. You know, the interventions are tools, and they can definitely be helpful in the right circumstance. But a lot of times we find that interventions are overused, and that tends to be because parents aren't familiar with what their choices and what their choices are, and when they have the right to say that they want an intervention, and when they can actually pass on an intervention. An example of that might be having your water broken. If you're in the hospital and you're laboring, a lot of times when you get to a certain point in labor, the medical team might suggest that your water be broken. And if you're not really familiar with the pros and cons of what that is, you're going to question whether or not that's the right decision to make. Whereas if you've already done the research, taken the class, and you know what the pros and cons are, you can make an informed decision right there. And it's your decision. It's not the medical staff's.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know, right? So,
Exactly.
how can childbirth education help parents create realistic expectations for labor, especially when things don't go according to plan?
So fear usually does come from the unknown. So knowing the different paths that may happen can help navigate them in a way that's a lot less stressful. When we don't know what might happen, like you said, we don't know what we don't know. So if you're faced with something suddenly that you weren't prepared for, you're going to have a natural rise in anxiety and fear. And that anxiety and that fear takes not only into account how you're dealing with this, the birth and the situation, but it also does affect how the baby handles it as well.
Hmm. Talk more about that.
So some of the things that I like to do is help moms come up with strategies to deal with anxiety, especially in the moment. So one of the things that we do is it's a very simple. It's the 5-5-5, where we take 5 seconds and relax our shoulders and our brow. We take 5 nice, deep, slow breaths. And then we focus on one calm thought or object for 5 seconds. It's a quick way to ground ourselves, get back into the moment, and refocus on whatever it is that we're dealing with in that moment.
It's amazing. How can education change the way parents communicate with their OB, midwife, or care team?
So, one of the things that I love to share with all of my clients is the very simple brain analogy when going into speaking to your caregivers. And this works even going forward when talking to when you have children, talking to their caregivers and to their educators. Whenever we have to make a decision, if we use our brain, and the analogy of our brain is to ask the questions: what are the benefits? What are the risks? What are the alternatives? And then the I is for intuition. What is your insides telling you? And then N is for nothing. Can we do nothing now? Or not now? Is this something that we can wait to make a decision on? So I try to equip all my parents with that analogy. And I tell my moms, if they forget their brain, don't forget their bra. The three most important things to ask is, what are the benefits, what are the risks, and what are the alternatives?
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that.
So we go into all of our visits with those questions in mind whenever a decision is being put before us, and we can use those same questions during the labor experience as well, whenever an intervention might be presented to us.
What are some questions you wish more parents felt comfortable about asking their providers before giving birth?
Oh my goodness, another excellent question. I think that this is one of the big ones that parents miss. And I think a lot of it boils down to the fact that with our insurance system the way that it is, a lot of parents don't have much of a choice in choosing their providers.
Mm.
But when you have the opportunity to to interview providers and choose the best one for you, I like for parents to ask those providers what their cesarean rates are and what are their induction rates. And I would like to know what their process is if labor is slow. Um, these are questions that we just don't think to ask, but they're really important questions to ask so that you know where your provider stands in relation to how you are expecting your labor to go.
Yeah, I think that's important because, I think when you are pregnant, you've heard other people's birth stories. And, if you've created your birth plan, then you're pretty confident that it's going to go the way that you imagine it will. But turns out that's not a decision you get to make, right? So things can go sideways for any number of reasons. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, and so it's important to ask those questions before you need an emergency C-section or before,
Absolutely.
or before you go past your due date, so
Right. That's another thing. Induction is a very common medical procedure that a lot of couples, don't really have the education behind why they're doing the induction, what their options are. Do they have to choose that induction? Can they choose to wait? Um, and I want to just backtrack a minute because you mentioned birth plan, and I do want to touch on that real quick because yes, I do encourage my clients to make a birth plan. I have a worksheet and everything that I send out if they don't have one of their own and they need one. to fill out so that they can answer all the questions about what they're looking for and what they want. And then after they've created that birth plan, I have them create another one, plan B, so that they can actually walk through a scenario of what if it doesn't go the way that we hope it does, so that we've already addressed each of the different scenarios. And while you don't have to make the decision now, you have already walked through it ahead of time so that when you're in that moment, you're going to be able to make an informed decision.
That's so smart. That's amazing. Yeah, I never even got never even got around to the point to breaking a birth plan. I didn't even have a suitcase packed when my water broke.
Right.
So not only did I not have plan A, I didn't even have plan B.
Yeah.
So speaking of
So
interventions, what are some common interventions that parents should understand before going into labor and why?
So what a big one was induction and
Mhm.
augmentation. So in induction is, when your baby hasn't come by the due date and they want to use medical interventions to help bring along that labor. And augmentation would be you did start labor naturally, but it's going at a slower pace than the medical team would like, and they want to use medical intervention to help bring those contractions along stronger and faster and closer so that they speed up your labor and your birthing process ultimately. um, I think that parents really need to understand what's involved with an induction if they're being presented with that as an option, or sometimes they're being presented with it as a non-option, that
Right.
it's the
The only
only
option.
option, the
Yeah.
only option, right? um, I think that parents should know a little bit more about how each intervention works and why they're in place. So know what type of medication they use for an induction and augmentation, because there are different types. There's oral, um, there's vaginal, there's IV. Pitocin is usually the go-to choice, which involves an IV, which also involves bringing on your contractions faster and stronger, which ultimately, not ultimately, but very commonly um, ends up being resulting in the needing of an epidural. So a lot of times a mom who may not have been planning an epidural will end up having the epidural because she went through the augmentation or she went through the induction and had the Pitocin. And just knowing that that's the way things go, it's not necessarily a bad thing if it happens to you, but knowing ahead of time what's going to happen helps eliminate that anxiety and that fear.
What role does a partner or support person play during birth, and how can education help them feel more prepared?
So this is one of my favorite parts of childbirth education, is getting the partner involved, especially a reluctant partner. Um, Most partners really want to be involved, but they're not sure how they can help. And so a big part of what I do is work with partners in helping them be the best partner they can be in the labor and birthing situation. And again, that works towards them being partners and being a team, because how they work together to bring their baby into this world is going to go a long way into how they're going to go into raising their child together.
That makes sense. That's a great, I love the way that how you put that. It was beautiful. How does preparation help partners or support people know when and how to step in during labor?
So education definitely helps a partner understand what labor looks like so that they can see where they need to step in and help. A big part of the labor process and supporting a laboring woman is knowing what she's going to need instinctively. So that preparation ahead of time goes a long way into being able to know what mom needs in that moment. Without that education ahead of time, we can be standing there with our hands in the air, not knowing how best to help mom. Whereas when we've gone through the education and we've done the different techniques and we now know what works for mom and what doesn't work for mom, we're not also wasting our time trying to get her onto her hands and knees and into a position that's not going to work for her, because we already tried that and we know that that's not the position that works for her. Whereas if we've spent the time and we've done the education, if that is the way that we know mom works, then we know right away, let's get that birthing ball, let's get mom in this position, and let's do that counter pressure, because we already have the education behind us to know when and where and how to step in that moment.
And also, I feel that the childbirth education would be helpful in knowing what when things are not I'm going to say normal in quotes there. So, and I'm thinking back to my own birth experience, right? So, it was my one and only child and my husband, and again, we probably only took two of the four childbirth classes, so really had no idea of what it would look like. I never had a sibling who I was in the hospital with, like, so I had no frame of reference. I had no friends that I had done this with, so all of this was new to me. And when my water broke on a Friday night, the next day I was having trouble breathing. But I think one of the problems that I'm sure you have seen plenty of, and there's lots of research that shows, is that oftentimes women are pregnant, birthing women are not listened to, which was my experience as well. So it took nearly 18 hours before anyone acted on the fact that I said I couldn't breathe. And it turned out in the end, the mystery was I had pneumonia, but it was nearly an entire day before anybody started running any testing, giving me oxygen or doing anything. So the fact of the matter is, like, maybe with childbirth education, like, we would know that maybe having trouble breathing isn't a normal part of giving birth. The hospital staffs didn't seem to think it was a big deal when I'm talking about not being able to breathe. But so I think this is my real world example of why I think it would be really important to know what a normal childbirth looks like. So if you're starting to things are starting to happen that don't fall within that framework, then it's like, this isn't normal. Like, somebody should be advocating. Like, I could have used somebody, a doula, who would have advocated for me, who would have said, she's saying she can't breathe. Somebody needs to start doing something instead of ignoring her, you know?
Exactly. And that's one of the number one reasons why I advocate for doula support, because there are far too many women whose voices go unheard in the labor room. And sadly, women of color with black and brown skin, they go unheard 4 times more often than their white counterparts. And it's a sad reality that we deal with here in the United States.
Yeah, and for such a wealthy country with some of the best medical services, we have a super high mortality, try that again, maternal mortality rate.
We actually have the worst maternal mortality rate of all developed countries,
Mm.
Anna Marie, the worst. And we have the best in technology when it comes to medical care. We are top notch in what we have to offer. And yet, our women, and it's not even during childbirth, we have a big crack in the system during postpartum care. I would be remiss not to mention that, because that's where our women are dying. They're dying
Mhm.
after they have their babies, in that 6 week time period where they're not getting care, where they're not being seen. And that's where we have a big gap in care for our new moms.
How can being educated ahead of time change the way someone experiences labor and delivery?
Oh, well, I see it all the time. When women come out after they've been educated, the women that I've worked with, even women that I haven't been their doula but have just gone to my class, I actually hear from other people in the community, "Oh, I know so and so. She took your class. She was so, she had such and such a birth, and she said she was so grateful for your class." So it comes back to me. I know that the people who did not just my class, but taking a childbirth education class, a comprehensive evidence-based child education class that doesn't just go over hospital procedure, is going to give you a voice, it's going to give you confidence, and it's going to give you the ability to have the best birth possible.
So this actually just made me think of a question. Um, how do you address the difference in how you tailor childbirth education when parents are planning on giving birth in a hospital versus giving birth in a birthing center? Is there different information that you give them, or is it more or less the same?
So the childbirth education, the education part of it is all the same. We go over what you're going to have in the hospital. If I'm just working with clients, if I'm just working with, say, I'm just working with a single couple, and they're going to have a birthing center. We won't go over all the hospital protocol because it's not necessary. But as far as everything that's going to happen during labor, that's all the same information we're going to talk about. How we're going to handle her labor, how we're going to manage her contractions, what we're going to do after the baby's born, how we're going to handle sleep patterns, in postpartum. All of that stays the same. The difference is just really in the mechanics of how long she's going to be there after the birth of the baby.
Hmm. And do you have the parents who are planning on doing a going to a birthing center when they're creating those birth plans? Did you have their plan B be go to the hospital? And what are your plans?
Plan B is always a transfer for a
Okay.
home birth or for a home birth or a birthing center birth. Yeah, Plan B is always the transfer.
Yeah. How does childbirth education impact the postpartum period and recovery?
So I think that that's also a great question. When when you've had an opportunity to take a comprehensive childbirth class and you've taken advantage of any of the other classes that are offered, most hospitals, at least in my area, offer um, e- continuing education of some sort. They'll have a new parenting class or a newborn class, um, or they offer breastfeeding classes. There's usually additional classes that are offered somewhere in our community. We actually, I'm in St. Lucie County, Florida, and I have to say here, we do have a very good program in place that makes sure that all of our moms that sign up for the healthy program, the Healthy Families program, will get somebody that comes and sees them on a weekly basis postpartum.
Oh,
So they are seen at least once a week during those 6 weeks. So we can catch anything that may need to, that would have gone missed. So, I mean, it's a wonderful program. I want to see healthy families, across the country, just a standard of care for all women.
yeah.
Um, but a comprehensive childbirth education class is going to give you some information about what to expect as well during that postpartum phase.
Yeah, those visits are huge because like even the easiest childbirth is still traumatic on the body. And
Absolutely.
I know that we had talked about when we met about how a lot of times you're working with single moms. And so those are people that may not have you know, people that live with them that can support them, and then trying to recover from this trauma of this baby coming out of your body, whether it's vaginally or not, and trying to take care of yourself and heal while trying to keep another being alive.
Right. And one of the things you had asked me, like, what's the surprise that people don't really expect, is that they really don't understand that there is a real concern with a new mom and her getting enough sleep.
Oh, don't tell me. I know all about it.
And that's another one of my biggest things, is if you have no other support, do you have somebody that can come and help you at least get some sleep so that you can get the rest that you need? Because a mom that's not getting enough sleep is not going to be well enough to take care of herself, let alone take care of her child.
Yeah, and for me in particular, a real world example of really not getting sleep is because my baby came so early, I had to pump because my milk hadn't come in. So that is like every 90 minutes, and that's during the night also, which meant like between setup and cleanup and storing the milk, it was really about 30 minutes in bed at a go and then up again to do the process all over again. So like in addition to recovering from severe preeclampsia, pneumonia, cesarean, emergency C-section. Um, on top of that, I was not sleeping at all because I had to pump all the time to get my
Yeah.
milk to come in. So it was brutal, brutal.
Brutal,
Yeah.
brutal. And so having support during that time frame, I mean, can be a lifeline for a mom.
Yeah. Do you see a difference in postpartum mental health outcomes for parents who felt informed going into birth?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, that's one of the things that I hear more often is when I reach out to clients, because I do maintain a relationship with several of my clients. I've had many clients that have come through my classes. As a doula, I have supported hundreds of couples and single parents, during that transition of actually bringing their babies into the world. And when they have had the education and the support, they take those skills that they learned to have that best birthing experience into their roles as parents. I mean, it's evident in when I speak to them, when I hear how they're doing, and they even acknowledge it at times that the breathing techniques that they use during labor help them get through, a screaming session when, their
Mhm.
baby was colicky or their baby was teething. And so we can take the things that we've learned to cope with labor and use them in real world situations to cope with parenting.
Oh, that's so smart. Can preparation before birth influence bonding, feeding, or confidence in those early weeks with a newborn?
I don't know how it can't. Um, One of the things that the childbirth education does for you is help you with your confidence levels.
Mm,
When you go into labor and birth confident that you know what your body's going to do and you know how you're going to react, you're going to go into parenting, postpartum, you're going to go into that role as a new mom and as a new dad prepared.
yeah, amazing. How do you see childbirth education connecting to infant development in those first few months of life?
Again, I think it's an educated parent educates their children.
Hmm.
If a parent is going to take the time and make sure that they're educated and taking and bringing their child into the world, that parent's going to take those same tools and they're going to use them when their child is in early development and they're going to educate their children.
Yeah, they're going to take the time to seek out the information to how to best support their child's development, which is
Absolutely.
Fledglings Flight. So, if you're listening to this podcast, then right now you're already proving your point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's so many ways, we can use simple tools and simple toys, and we can be a presence with them is what the parent's job is. It's not just to put a toy in front of a child and let a child play. It's our interactions with that child and those toys that makes all the difference.
True. How can childbirth education shape the transition into those first few weeks at home with a newborn, especially when routines, feeding, and sleeping are still developing?
I think a lot of that all comes down to making sure that you have a good support system in play. And we spend a lot of time during the classroom, during my childbirth classes, working on how you're going to put your support team together. And it's not just your birthing support team, it's your postpartum support team afterwards as well. And while I didn't develop it, I do have a postpartum plan packet that I give to all my clients, that just really helps parents figure out what they're going to be looking at over those first 6 to 8 weeks after the baby's born. And then we also have the ability to write in specific things for your individual experience. So I think if you take advantage of all of the education that's available to you, you're going to walk out with that mindset that you have not only the confidence to go into birth, but you have that confidence to be the parent that to be a good, supportive, and educating parent. Did I say that
Fabulous.
right?
For families who are feeling overwhelmed, what's one place they can start when it comes to preparing for birth?
You can give me a call and schedule a 45-minute consultation. My consultations are free. I don't charge anything for you to have a conversation with me. You can ask me any questions that you have, depending on where you are and how helpful I can be for you. I would be able to hopefully give you some information and references and referrals to people in your area that would be the support to get you started.
What do you wish every expecting parent knew before giving birth?
I wish that every expected parent knew how to make informed decisions, how to stay calm, and how to support one another.
Ah, that's beautiful. How can parents get a hold of you?
I can be reached via text at my phone number, which is 407-973-4620. And I can also be found on my website. All my information to contact me is on my website, which is mybabylady.com.
And do you have a book that you told me you have a book? So let's talk
I
about
have a
that.
book coming out. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I have a book coming out. It's called My Baby Lady: Exposing the Worst Place to Give Birth. And it talks about that, how here in America we have some of the best medical care and yet some of the worst outcomes. And not only do we expose what's happening here in the United States, but I also share practical ways that we can make changes through education and support for our birthing parents.
Amazing. We'll have that the link or the name of your book and link when it's available in the caption when we post this podcast.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much for your time. I could talk to you all day.
This
What
was
I love
wonderful.
about this conversation is that it reminds us that preparation isn't about controlling every outcome. It's about feeling informed, supported, and confident as you head into one of the biggest transitions of your life. Susan, thank you for helping us see childbirth education not as something optional, but as a powerful tool for advocacy and early parenting success. And for any parent listening who's feeling unsure about where to start, remember you don't have to know everything, you just have to be willing to learn. If you'd like to learn more about Susan's work, visit My Baby Lady. And don't forget to subscribe to A Parent's Guide to Child Development for more conversations that support you and your child from the very beginning. Thanks for tuning into A Parent's Guide to Child Development, where we decode milestones, demystify meltdowns, and occasionally question whether goldfish crackers count as a food group. Spoiler, they do. Make sure to follow us on Spotify and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss an expert tip, breakthrough strategy, or aha moment that can make a big difference in your child's development. It's cheaper than therapy and less messy than glitter slime. We'll be back soon with more expert advice, real talk, and zero judgment. Until then, keep calm and try not to step on any Legos.